This episode of the History Guy brought to you by Magic Spoon, healthy cereal that tastes too good to be true.
According to the New York Times just last week, Reese's peanut butter cups are still the most popular candy for Halloween in 2025, but they say gummy bears are rising in popularity, especially among generations Z and A. And as Generation A or Generation Alpha is actually the generation that is most likely to show up your doorstep to trick or treat this year, you might want to take that advice into consideration. But why are gummy bears more popular among these generations that were born since the year 2000, as gel-like candies like gummy bears are actually quite old? Well, combining old ideas with new trends might teach us that the humble gummy bear, well, is more important than it appears.
Do you miss those childhood cereals that you loved, but they just have too much sugar and not enough protein? Magic Spoon is childhood reinvented. All the flavor that reminds you of when you were a kid, but with grown-up ingredients. Magic Spoon has the great taste you love with more protein and less sugar. Magic Spoon cereals are great for a low-carb lifestyle or those who are carb conscious, but being high in protein with no sugar, Magic Spoon actually fits into a variety of diets. With 13 to 14 grams of protein, 0 sugar, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs in each serving, you can feel good about what you're eating. And it has that satisfying, crispy, crunchy, airy feel without the chewy stickiness of a protein bar. It really is the ideal protein on the go. Use my code THG or click on the link in the description to try Magic Spoon cereal or treats today and get $5 off. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed by a 100% happiness guarantee online. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link in the description or go to magicspoon.com/THG or scan the QR code on the screen for $5 off. If you're wondering why you might care about the history of a chewy bear, few candies have had such an impact on culture. Jacqueline Bart writes in a 2014 edition of Bon Appetit magazine, "Sure, chocolate bars and the many variations thereof remain the top-selling treats across the globe, but how many cocoa-based snacks inspired a hit animated TV series in the 1980s? A song with over 45 million hits on YouTube and played a pivotal role in the plot of an award-winning Broadway musical about a transgender East German rock singer. But why? Why have these chewy treats, which themselves come in an astounding variety of forms, had such an impact on culture? Well, while the trend might right now be with younger generations, it isn't exactly a new candy. In fact, some of the earliest candy likely had a lot in common with modern gummy treats. Mary Bellis, who describes herself as an inventions expert, writes on the website ThoughtCo last May that the history of candy dates back to ancient peoples who must have snacked on sweet honey straight from beehives. The first candy confections were fruits and nuts rolled in honey. Honey was used in ancient China, Middle East, Egypt, Greece, and the Roman Empire to coat fruits and flowers to preserve them or to create forms of candy. While some of the first candies might have been hard, things like candied fruits would have had a chewy consistency and, of course, fruity flavors, much like modern gel candies like gummy bears. The word candy itself is derived from a Sanskrit word, kanda, meaning a piece of sugar. When candy was introduced in the ancient world, sugar was a rare and expensive commodity. These early candies would mostly have been enjoyed only by the wealthy, and thus were not necessarily considered the treat that we think of today. Rather, Bally's explains, before the Industrial Revolution, candy was often considered a form of medicine, either used to calm the digestive system or cool a sore throat. In the Middle Ages, candy appeared on the tables of only the most wealthy at first. At that time, it began as a combination of spices and sugar that was used as an aid to digestive problems. That is interesting, as one of the things that is somewhat peculiar to jelly candies today is that they have worked beyond the candy market into ways to deliver medicines and supplements. The New York Times noted in 2017, gummy products all over now account for $1 billion of the $41 billion supplement market in the United States, a more than 25% jump in sales since 2015, according to Ibis World. In fact, one of the many reasons that gummies are particularly popular among Generation Z and A is that many of them grew up eating gummy vitamins. More on that later, but it makes another interesting connection. Candied fruit might have a textural similarity to jellied candies, but to be a true jellied candy, the candy must have some sort of gelling agent. And perhaps not surprisingly, the first true jellied candy became popular as medicine. The exact date of the invention is unclear, as candy historian Tim Richardson writes in his 2003 book Sweets, A History of Temptation. Specific names and dates are often erroneously associated with the invention of particular sweets, not least for commercial reasons. But a candy based on a gel made of starch and sugar was likely invented in Persia during the Sassanid period between 226 and 652 AD. Richardson explains that the Persians developed a sweet, the Nowruz, meaning New Year. It too was made from sugar and starch and cut into chunks. It was displayed on necklaces and eaten during special celebrations. This is interesting itself, as we still, of course, use candy to celebrate holidays, including, of course, Halloween. But it was the next incarnation that would bring it towards the Gummy candies of today. The treat remained popular for a long time, but its purpose might have changed over time. The website True Treats explains, jump ahead to the 9th century, and this treat was being made in Arab apothecaries as a remedy for sore throats. Its new name was Yahat Ule Hulkum, which means, My Lord, have mercy on me. The name was then shortened to Lakum, meaning throat ease. The candy, however, would become popular, at least according to legend, for easing a different kind of problem. Jonathan Brown explains in the newspaper The Independent in 2005. Abdul Hamid I, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, who ruled from 1774 to 1789, might not have been much of a military leader. His reluctant forays into battle with the Russians nearly cost the Ottomans their empire. But he did know a thing or two about women. If legend is to be believed, the 27th Sultan's understanding of the needs of his closest female companions left the world an altogether more congenial legacy than his bellicose relatives, one that has seen his fame live way beyond imperial decline. Faced with the sticky problem of how to keep happy the 4 wives and hundreds of mistresses maintained behind the elegant facade of the Topkapi Palace, Hamid hit on a sweet solution. The Sultan summoned to his court the greatest confectioners in the empire and ordered them to find a dessert that would quell the rumblings of discontent within his harem. This story may simply be legend, but I think that many of us can identify with using gifts of candy to promote domestic bliss. But another legend suggests that the confection was invented by a Turkish confectioner, Ali Muhaddin Haki Bakir, who opened a shop in Constantinople in 1777. Brown explains in Constantinople, fashionable ladies swapped offerings of it in lace handkerchiefs. It became love tokens between courting couples and the accompaniment of choice to a cup of strong Turkish coffee. While Richardson challenges the legend that Bakir was the actual inventor, there is no doubt that he was selling the treat from when his shop opened in 1777. And Demetrios Leno explained on the webpage of the BBC in 2019, the shop is still operated by Bakir's great-granddaughter today, where it is sold to Sweet Tooth residents and visitors for more than 2 centuries, making the company the oldest in Turkey and one of the 100 oldest companies in the world. Brown writes that the recipe spread through the Near and Middle East, what is modern-day Greece and the Balkans. Finally, True Treats reads, trade being what it was at the time, word spread, and folks in England started enjoying it too, renaming it Lumps of Delight. There, the precursor to the gummy bear had a surprising cultural impact. True Treats explains, in the mid-1800s it took on a literary life, starting with Charles Dickens' The Mystery of Edwin Drood, 1870, where character Rosebud announces, I want to go to the Lumps of Delight shop. Soon the candy was called Turkish Delight. The treat was then included in another famous work. It was the treat for which the character Edmund, of course, sold out his entire family in the C.S. Lewis classic, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Culinary writer Kara Strickland asked in a 2016 edition of JSTOR Daily, with the entire world of food and confectionery open to him, why Turkish Delight? The answer might well be related to the Second World War. Strickland explains, Lewis began taking notes for the story that would eventually become The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in 1939, when he and his household began receiving groups of schoolchildren fleeing the bombings of World War II. One refugee girl poked around a wardrobe in his home, unwittingly launching the series of beloved children's books. During the war, Strickland writes, not only were sweets hard to come by, even when you had the ration coupons, but the prices were also exorbitant. It was hardly the time for pounds of Turkish Delight. It makes sense that Turkish Delight would have been on Lewis's brain as he crafted a book where Christmas features as a main theme, Strickland notes. When the White Witch asks Edmund what he liked best to eat, it's entirely possible that Lewis was answering for him, the candy that would be most difficult and expensive to obtain. Edmund isn't just asking the witch for candy. He's essentially asking her for Christmas, too. Strickland notes that the candy helps to humanize the otherwise unlikable character. For Edmund, Turkish Delight represented a way to taste happier times when his family was all together and the future was unmarred by world conflict. It's hard to blame him for reaching for the box the witch offers and filling his mouth as quickly as possible to make up for lost time. Well, the website Snack Stack explains The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was published in 1950, and if you look through newspaper archives and the like, you don't see much of anything about Turkish delight for a couple of decades. In 1979, CBS aired a primetime made-for-television adaptation of the book, which was partially sponsored by Kraft Foods, who capitalized on the event by advertising that they sold all the ingredients necessary to make the magical snack. This contributed to the development of a wide audience for the candy. And Brown writes when the candy was again featured in a 2005 big screen adaptation of the novel, Fry's 21st century version of the historic sweet disappeared like magic from the shelves, while Tesco has reported a 200% increase in sales. The boom in demand was called the Narnia effect. Invented as a New Year celebration as early as the 3rd century AD, sold as a cure for sore throat in the 18th century, and featured in a novel published in 1950 inspired by war rationing in the 21st century, demand is still strong. That is history. And the general recipe, using a gel made from sugar and starch, made much less expensive by industrial production of sugar, would become a very popular treat. It is the basis of the gumdrop, a treat whose name first appeared in print in 1860. The candy is associated with Christmas and often used to decorate gingerbread houses. While some recipes use gelling agents other than cornstarch, such as pectin or gelatin or agar powder, the cornstarch recipe lives on. The popular candy sold at movie theaters called Juji fruits, made by the Haida Candy Company since the 1920s, and Dots, trademarked in 1945, are made with a cornstarch and sugar or cornstarch gel, as are Swedish fish, another popular product introduced in the U.S. in 1957 that is fish-shaped. Journalist Linda Rodriguez McRobbie wrote in 2017, because, well, they were Swedish, and the fishing industry in Sweden was very large, and they were developed specifically for the U.S. and Canadian markets and proved almost immediately popular. Swedish fish then became permanently entrenched in U.S. candy culture in the 1960s and 70s. As they are less sweet than other gel candy, Swedish fish are a type of candy often referred to in Europe as wine gums. And no, they don't contain wine, it's just the title indicate they cater to a more adult palate. Because they do not contain gelatin, Swedish fish are vegetarian and most often vegan, although some packs may use beeswax, so check the label. And it is big business. Tootsie Roll Industries indicates that 4 billion dots are produced yearly. Mondelez International of Hamilton, Ontario reports $111.4 million in U.S. sales of Swedish fish annually. And while Haida doesn't release production numbers, the estimated production of Juji fruits is in the billions annually. But the most common form of starchy gel candy is actually a combination of the basic recipes of Turkish delight and a process called panning, process of rolling in sugar used to create a candy shell for the confection, Jordan almonds. The new confection was likely invented in Boston, possibly by candy maker William Shraft, who in 1861 started making the candy as a way to send a gift to soldiers fighting for the Union in the Civil War. Their portability made them ideal for mailing, and by some accounts, they were the first candy sold by weight. The name commonly used today, though, didn't likely come until later. Britannica Online writes that the first confirmed use of the word jelly bean describing the candy occurred in 1886, and it first appeared in a dictionary in 1905. Like the original Turkish delight, the candy was sold as a holiday candy, first sold at Christmas, but True Treats notes the jelly bean won its most enduring acclaim around 1930 as an Easter candy. Jelly beans, of course, are still sold today under brands such as Mike and Ike and Hot Tamales, sold by the Just Born Company of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and Fairfield, California-based Jelly Belly. But while these are all gel candies, there is another popular gelling agent that makes a different consistency: gelatin. The website Candy Mentor explains that starch-based gummies use hydrated starch granules that swell when heated, creating a gel-like texture upon cooling through retrogradation, formed by realigning and recrystallizing amylose and amylopectin molecules. While gelatin-based gummies, gelatin derived from collagen, forms a gel-like matrix through gelatinization and protein network formation, giving gummies their characteristic chewy texture. And the website Jin Jin Food explains jelly is a semi-solid fruit juice, sugar, and gelatin product. It is usually presented in a glass serving dish or plate. The end product has a shiny surface and tends to have a sweet taste and a relatively smooth consistency. Gummy is a chewable candy made from gelatin, which is flavored and sweetened. Gummy candies come in different forms and sizes, including bears and worms. They are usually soft and chewy and have an elastic structure. It isn't clear exactly who first produced a candy using gelatin, but it might have originally been intended to be a gummy bear, but, well, it didn't turn out that way. Lauren Potts writes in a 2015 edition of BBC News that the first jelly candy to use gelatin might have been the work of an Austrian confectioner who worked for Fry's of Lancashire, and that it was thought that in 1864 he was asked to make a mold for jelly bears, but the resulting sweets looked more like newborn infants. Thus, the first attempt at a gummy bear ended up having the rather surprising name Unclaimed Babies. Richardson told the BBC, although the name might sound ghastly to modern ears, sweet eaters in the Victorian era would barely have batted an eyelid. Unclaimed babies were a part of life back then. People would leave them on church steps, and it's possible that people even found the name amusing. While there is a documented record of the name Unclaimed Babies, Potts explains the Unclaimed Babies name was relatively short lived and petered out when Bassett of Sheffield began producing the novelty shaped candy in 1918. Archivists at Mondelez Limited, which took over Cadbury in 2009, believe the sweets were rebranded as Peace Babies to mark the end of World War I, though the stories proved difficult to corroborate. A shortage of raw materials halted production during World War II, perhaps a fitting hiatus given the irony of their supposed name, and it wasn't until 1953 when they were relaunched as Jelly Babies that their popularity really took off. And as people in the UK well know, Jelly Babies are still a thing. In 2024, a survey found that 65% of respondents in the UK chose Jelly Babies as their favorite sweet, although eating candy babies still seems a tad odd. Potts writes, do you, for instance, nibble away at its arms and legs until you're left with a helpless torso? Or are you the ruthless type that goes straight for the kill and chops off its head, Henry VIII style? While gummy candy can come in many forms, it was likely 1922 that German confectioner Hans Riegel Sr., the founder of the Haribo Candy Company, first perfected the gummy bear that we still enjoy today, using the German spelling Gummi, meaning rubber, although it's often spelled Gummy or Gummie in the United States. Today, Haribo ships around 160 million gummy bears globally every day. Bert explains, in fact, according to Haribo, if you laid all of the gold bears produced in a year head to toe, they would form a jiggly, tooth-decaying ring around the Earth 4 times. Of course, now many companies produce gummy bears, as well as gummy almost anything. Gummy red frogs are popular in Australia. Worldwide, gummy ribbons, belts, worms, cola-flavored gummies shaped like soda bottles, and even gummy candies shaped as eyeballs, pickles, and sushi are sold. In the 1980s, companies started selling gummies with a sour coating. Flicks Candy of Niles, Illinois offers sour boogers with the flavors snottermelon, sour green boogie, and slime apple. One popular sour gummy has an odd story. According to CandyFavorites.com, in the beginning, Sour Patch Kids were shaped as Martians to capitalize on the space enthusiasm of the 1970s. They then transformed into children to capitalize on the Cabbage Patch Kids craze of the 1980s. And of course, there is another use for gummy, and one surprisingly reminiscent of the former use of gel candy. Rachel Premack writes in Business Insider in 2020, manufacturers began experimenting with vitamins in the 1990s. Hero Nationals, founded in 1995, told Business Insider that it was responsible for America's very first gummy vitamin. I used to always take my nieces to the sweet factory, and we all loved the gummy bears, Jennifer Hodges, the CEO of Hero, told Business Insider in an email. I thought how amazing it would be to put vitamins into an all-natural gummy bear.
And of course, I haven't even come close to listing all the various types of gummy and gel candies. According to Data Bridge market research firm, the global value of the gummy candy market was $23.93 billion in 2023. And of course, gummy candies aren't the only kind of candies that come in an almost infinite variety, but they are special in their way. Perhaps they're so particularly liked by Generation Z and Generation A because they were the first generations to grow up eating gummy vitamins, and they associate them with health. Perhaps The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and its Turkish delight was among the first movies that they saw. Maybe it's because they were the first generations to grow up never having not known sour gummies. They might simply like that the huge variety of colors and flavors and the gummy texture makes them sort of a toy as well as a candy, but it also simply might mean nostalgia for them. The New York Times quotes Shannon Weiner of the Ferrara Candy Company when she says, what we get out of Halloween is often a reflection of ourselves. Candy, she says, is social currency to people. So this year, when the kids come to your door and you hand out that candy, understand that it's more than just a holiday tradition and a bit of fun. It represents centuries of technological innovation that was impacted by things like war and literature and, well, simply taste. And I guess knowing the history of the candy adds to its value as a social currency. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. This is the cup of a carpenter. You chose wisely.